Đây là vết rách, từ đó ta rời khỏi. Tất cả những ký ức tôi có thể thuộc về lại chẳng thuộc về tôi. Mình sẽ luôn là người nọ đến từ nơi nọ. Đấy là lối dòng lối nước. Biển cả, biển cả. Nhưng nước nào rồi cũng ngược dòng, mang dáng hình nước mắt. Đây là vết rách, từ đó ta rời khỏi. Tất cả những ký ức tôi có thể thuộc về lại chẳng thuộc về tôi. Mình sẽ luôn là người nọ đến từ nơi nọ. Đấy là lối dòng lối nước. Biển cả, biển cả. Nhưng nước nào rồi cũng ngược dòng, mang dáng hình nước mắt.
Hello. Okay. I think we on. Welcome to everyone. This is an honor to collaborate and be hosted by the Poetry Center at San Francisco State that was founded in 1954 with roots with the 1950s poetry renaissance. In our last accented event, poetry was referred to as conscience, and as such, the Poetry Center stands at the conscience of San Francisco, right, that present about 33 public readings a year. So I am Isabelle Thuy Pelaud, the co-director of the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network. And this is the first event presented by a new academic community initiative titled DVAN at SFSU. So this is a very special event. So we're really happy for all of you to be here. DVAN at SFSU is a project of San Francisco State University College of Ethnic Studies and is sponsored by DVAN at Intersection for the Arts. If you're interested, go to dvan.org. And the idea is to advance mutual educational goals and to promote Vietnamese American diasporic literary arts and other cultural productions. So what we have today is a very special program. Is one that we're going to start, with a special program of DVAN, and this program is called She Was No Master. So She Was No Master is a collective project of women writers of the Vietnamese diaspora who engage in collaborative, polyvocal, and hybrid poetic works. Through a collaborative writing process and art engagement activities that reach across borders, this project endeavor bring into concert the voice and experience of women writers of the Vietnamese diaspora. And there's very few spaces like this. The name She Was No Masters was inspired from Audre Lorde's, right? The notion that the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house, some 25 years ago, in light of, the institutional racism, sexism, and homophobia in academia, meaning the awareness that knowledge was imbued with white and heterosexual bias that made it basically impossible for women of color to disrupt oppression using the logic that justifies oppression. So this is going to be the introduction, is maybe the theme for a discussion today. And I'm going to turn to our panelists. It's my honor and a pleasure to introduce them. And I'm also a personal fan of their work and really of who they are as people. So Dao Strom, who is here, she's, hello Dao, she's actually the leader of that initiative. It's called She Was No Master. Dao Strom is also prolific writer. She's the author of the poetry collection Instruments and its musical companion piece, Travel Odes. You heard some of her music when you entered this space. A bilingual poetry art book called You Will Always Be Someone from Somewhere Else, and a hybrid form memoir. We were meant to be a gentle people with song cycle East-West, and also 2 books of fiction, The Gentle Order of Girls and Boys, that just came out again in a paperback, and Grass Roof, Tin Roof. She was a recipient of 2016 Creative Capital Artist Award and the 2020 Oregon Literary Art Career Fellowship, among many other awards. Dao Strom is born in Vietnam, and she grew up in the Sierra Nevada foothills in Northern California and lives in Portland, Oregon. And I'm just going to introduce also next poet, Khi Nao, tell you a little bit about her work, and then we're going to let the poet introduce their own work. Khi Nao is the author of 4 poetry collections, Human Tetris, Ship Machines, Umbilical Hospital, The Old Philosopher, A Brief Alphabet of Tortures, the novel Fish in Exiles. And she's also very, very prolific. I think she also has more work. It includes poetry, fiction, film, and cross-genre collaboration. And she was a fall 2019 fellow at the Black Mountain Institute. So it's really an honor to have those 2 poets here today. We're going to start with 2 short videos, followed by collaborative poems that they wrote together and going to perform for you today. And then we'll be followed by discussions about the work and also a Q&A at the end. I just want to say a note that for you guys who are listening, you can turn the subtitles on and off at the CC bottom at the right of your screen. So, because some of the words will be in Vietnamese. So if you want to see the translation, we have that options. We also have a staff in the chat sections from DVAN, and if there's something that you want to know that comes up, you can ask question, and the staff is going to do a quick research and provide you the answer for you as much as we can. So I just want to now introduce, let Dao Strom say a few words about the video she's going to share with you. Dao.
Thanks, Isabelle, and thank you to DVAN at SFSU and the Poetry Center for having us here. We are going to start by sharing some work, and since we're talking about poetics across genres, we're going to show some media that is a mix of things. I'm going to start by sharing a video that has a song, and then I'll read a little bit from my poetry, and then I'll turn it over to V, and she will also share a video poem and some reading, and then we'll talk about a collaborative work, a bilingual poem that we'll also show a little bit more there, so that gives you an idea of what you'll see here. I'm going to do my best to share the screens smoothly. This first video is just a song. It's a little different than the one that you heard coming in. And this is more just a song with words and music. And I'm going to try to share it here. Can everyone see this?
I don't wanna be the one caught waiting downtown. Caught in a rainstorm without a cloud. You thought I would just be hanging around. Baby, you believe you can set it up. One for every town, and no one's gonna stop and ask what's up. Why me this time around? If you believe we were made to love, then you'd be the only angel that I ever had a dream of. And I've dreamed about 1,000 loves, and they're all of you. Even the oceans can turn to rust. I know what'll we do with the salt and dust that is clinging to our clothes as we're calling hallelujah to the back of God. And just as the waves I sent were not for the faint of heart. If you believe we were made to love, then you'd be the only angel that I ever had a dream of. And I've dreamed about 1,000 loves, and they're all of you. I'll take my time telling you what I see, or where I'll be when your light shines on me, and it calls me back to see, like it always does.
Okay. All right. I hope that played smoothly enough without too many other Zoom things happening. I'm going to read from my new book called Instrument. Can everyone hear me all right? Thank you. Okay, great. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat while I'm talking. I'm going to read from Instrument, and I'm going to read just a little poem section and then a little section of lyric essay. So this came out last fall, 2020. Is the moon refugee like me? Is the earth incomplete? I've always had a thing for gathering rocks from shores. Sometimes we use the word liquefy to describe the desire of a violence so conscriptive it returns the body to states of permeability. So too was I born of debris, home cold from the scattering, a dark landing. Eventually, liquid hardens when cooled. Fire dies when deprived oxygen. I don't trust human memory being what it is. Is the moon refugee, past liquid, broken twin, combustible debris, stolen orbit, aberrant satellite, pre-binary, antecedent, inner sanctum, eyeless sensory, mirror missioned, or home itself? Precedent, unconsciousness, nesting, sedent, refusal. Is the moon refugee or refuge or refuse? Us, we refuse to refuse. Human memory, being what it is, it slips. Is the moon refugee or refuge? Is the sun a holder of, the earth a holder back? I stood down wound, down heart, en route. Do you believe in the sound it takes us to where? I am standing en route, down wound. So I'm going to read just a few fragments from this other section that is toward the end of the book. And part of this book involves a return trip that I made to Vietnam in late 2019, January 2020, and Isabelle was accompanying me on this. We had some adventures. We went to this region, and these pictures are from the Phong Nha cave in central Vietnam, that region of the jungle. And I'm just going to read some just contemplations on sort of what I was thinking about in going back to that area, and then just a little bit of thoughts about the caves. It is said that trauma is stored in the body. The body retains memories the conscious mind does not remember, and thus it is that a body may go on acting blindly, even needlessly, on events no longer extant. And so I had thought bringing my body to a particular place or proximate region at least might be one means of wringing out some of the trauma habits associated with that place. 2 decades, 3 returns, still no language, still that refugee romantic phenomenological hope of dragging back out into the light something lost, curative, possibly rectifying. Injury carried within cave of self is by its nature a non-extant, a sunken topography. What is the body of memory? What is the language of the body that cannot conceive of time? The language of memory, meanwhile, forms and reforms, body after etheric body, out of echo after echo of no longer extant imaginaries. A collective ghost nation body reforms. Definition of ghost being without body. We chase the immaterial light. And where do all the ghosts go once they are remembered? Do they rise up to evaporate into the mist, find home again in the treetops? Do they exist in waiting, only to fall down again into our hair when we pass beneath? Often I wished I did not have a body, so I did not have to travel back to places I could not remember. Inside the caves is actually a fervid, deep lightlessness. Cave grows itself, drip by drip, in overlong precipitation and darkness. The sole objective of water is to travel as easily as it can downhill. Rock, conducive of both water and air, yields, ever so interminably, karst whorls. A slow, turbulent, fetid, beautifying, defying, intricately violent water limestone dance ensues. Karst worlds. The mountain never imagined what its hollows in yielding could hold. While the machine of war was dropping enough bombs to recarpet the jungle floor, this is what she kept hidden within. Music of rain on jungle canopy descending. I begin by extracting water out of the rock. I'll stop there. Could we have V on, or I'm going to share a video of V's now. I don't know if V wants to say a couple words before I show it. This is a video that V and I made together, and it features a poem of V's. And we went into the desert outside of Las Vegas to make this. So make sure I can. So I have to. Sorry about this. I'm trying to get out of this screen. Going to share it now. So just let me know if if you can't see this.
One day I'll have Vietnam again, before Đại Việt, before Minh Mang. Nguyện, forget now. The culmination of tomorrow is only a thread and a body beneath us. Have faith, your water is not merely your water till you die of thirst. As the sun undresses its light before the mirror of the late afternoon, despite how frequently the moon gives birth to darkness. Nguyện, where is your homeland? The saddest fascia of your thought is the rings around your memory. Another planet lives there, Saturn, you say. And it tells you, có công mài sắc có ngày nên kim. Say sorry, then the emergency exit glowing inside you pulsates. There it is, forgive. It is not like flossing your teeth with a Band-Aid. Near you, a woman rolls down the windshield of a heart and asks you if you want her purse or the breeze. When she opens the door for you in her black linen slacks, you feel the willow tree of your desire grow another leaflet. How autumn it flutters and opens itself before you like a second French door. She suggests your blouse or my house, and when you are both alone, you touch the tips of her roofs like they are the EpiPen of your survival. Even if you are not allergic to love, please do forget. The gunpowder is merely human ash, time fuses pretending to weapon-grade refugees. Nguyện, lock your door. The saddest padlocks are not the ones without any keyholes. And yes, despair is when God flocks the sun for giving out too much light. Over there is forgiveness without resistance. Your heartbeats is falling asleep inside you like rainwater beneath a gutter. There, your wedding ring ambushed by rice and commitment. Love is a bow of ammunition and jiao long. It is true. You've confused the barrier between you and tomorrow for bánh mì ốp la.
Okay. I think we're going to have Vi read from some of her work now.
Hello there. Is Vi? Can Vi come and show?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Before I start reading my work, I just want to make a few notes about Dao's Angel's song earlier in the opening. I grew up listening to a lot of Vietnamese nhạc vàng and some of the music before 1975. And Dao's songs in particular reminds me so much of what is it like the English version of the music before 1975. It always breaks my heart. This song particularly, Only Angel, breaks my heart the most. Each time I listen to it, it sutures the symmetry between loss and the refugee experience I had, and it contextualized it in English for me. And oftentimes, I can only experience that devastation, that loss in Vietnamese, but not in English. And Dao work, this song particularly speaks most tenderly to that loss so well. So I'm so grateful to have that as an introduction to our work. And also when I was in France, there was a woman who tried to invite me, well, she invited me into her apartment, a random stranger actually, that I broke a bottle of wine in France. And she was teaching me how to make tea. She said, you know, you have to boil the water and let the tea float on the steam first to open it up. And I feel Dao's Only Angel song is that gesture of putting tea leaves above the steam so that you can feel the sorrow of her work more fully. I'm going to read from my forthcoming collection called A Bell Curve is a Pregnant Straight Line. It's coming out of Press 1111, 1111 Press in July of this year. The first poem I'm going to read is called Wildo. God, you carried this device in my chest called love, and I, a child of infertility, choose you to fertilize the left side, the left testicle of intimacy, while sitting on the right hand, of course, I grope the goose, which is your ghost, not holy, not resurrection, not an assault on the nature of divinity. God, you once castrated my belief in you. It was February or March in a sublet in Brooklyn, and I still respond by emasculating your vision of toilet paper, hand sanitizer, hands clapping into a Berlin night. Let me be clear, the door is not you. The skylight isn't me gazing down at you. The window isn't your window. I never view you as anybody's hard husband, never wed for now. Let me be empty, the Indo-European root signifier for widow. Let me be reft. Let me leave your bedside while I neuter you out of my own private galaxy. The next poem I'm going to read from this collection is called Safa, and I'm sending the link onto the chat, and I'll have the both versions in Vietnamese and its translation by T in the link as well. I'm going to read both in Vietnamese and English, and I'll start with the English version first. Safa, I husk the etymology of your fingers by tasting the eternal night around their tips. Fennel emulates your desire into my broth. I am clavicle, not vulture, cleaving your anaesthesia for pain. I hush the wild nest near your basin-shaped avocade. You elevate in your throes of ardor, and I bend to meet your feminine furniture, legs and all, as a reference for dipstick and stability. If your tongue is one type of transitive verb, will my lips be able to take yours as a direct object for a complication of time? My left cheek seeks in sequence the grammar of your breath, the translucent material of your fugaciousness, as you lean from syntax into chopstick. If time identifies herself as pansexual and you agree to be nodes on my laptop, if my desire is binary and yours has urinary tract infection, won't it be cruel if I suggest we all sleep together, muscle and all, on a bed of salt and oysters? Won't it be fun for bivalves to be bisexual? to open a Vietnamese restaurant for lesbians called Sapphire. And here's the translation of it. Tôi khẽ ngữ nguyên của những ngón tay nàng bằng cách nếm đêm vĩnh cửu xung quanh đầu ngón. Tiểu hồi thiêu khao khát của nàng trong nước canh tôi và màu xương đòn không tham tàn chẻ đôi hột hồi hương cho nỗi đau. Tôi khẽ hoang vu gần hình trậu diễu hành của nàng. Nàng gương trong dãy dụa nồng nhiệt và tôi nghiêng người đón. Nữ thất nàng, chân và tất thảy như điện dẫn cho tác phẩm đôi và phép lịch sự. Nếu lưỡi nàng là một loại động từ, liệu môi tôi có thể ôm môi nàng như một tân ngữ chật điện cho biến chứng của thời gian? Giò má trái tôi tìm tuần tự ngữ pháp hơi thở nàng, chất liệu mờ của trống vánh nơi nàng. Khi nàng ngã từ cú pháp vào chiếc đũa. Nếu thời gian định danh tị hoàng tính và nàng đồng ý làm các nút điểm trên laptop tôi. Nếu ao ước của tôi là nhị phân và của nàng nhiễm trùng đường tiết niệu. Sẽ ác ý không nếu tôi đề nghị tất cả chúng ta cùng ngủ chung với nhau? Cơ bắp và toàn thể trên lòng sông của muối và con hầu. Sẽ vui thú không nếu các thân mềm hai mảnh vỏ đều song tính và mở một quán ăn Việt cho đồng tình luyến ái nữ đặt tên Sáp Phở. So I think I'm done with my portion of the reading.
Thanks, Vi. I think we are going to share one more collaborative poem, and then we'll have some conversation. And would love to talk to the audience too if people have any questions. So I'll introduce this. Last year I was commissioned by Portland State University and some other City of Portland entities to make a poem for a public artwork, and I created. I was writing from 2020, and a lot was going on in this year, and the poem, they also wanted it to be bilingual. So this is a poem I wrote, and I asked V to translate it into Vietnamese for me. And sort of one of the themes that I came up with in thinking about what was happening last year was the element of breath and air. And so that's sort of what I'll say about it. And then the poem is actually it's a text artwork, and it's on metal, and I'll show some pictures of it before we start. Let me get over to my, so this is what it looks like. And it's, I'll slip through the pictures here. Let's see if we can. So this is a closer view, and the English and the Vietnamese words sort of intermingle on these panels. And at night, the panels, the words light up. So we're going to read this together. If I can get out of here. Sorry. Okay, start my video. Are you ready, V?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so this is sort of a debut for this phone. It's called We Breathe, and breathing is an asynchronous music. Everybody needs the air. It's a long title. We breathe, and breathing is an asynchronous music, yet everybody needs the air.
Mình thở và sự thở là một đồng nhạc. Ai cũng cần không khí.
We are riven tender and tender riven.
Mình đinh tán. Âu yếm và âu yếm tán đinh.
Asked to know, hear our roots, we dove into the revolving, polyphonic, tender, timber, ether.
Hỏi để biết, nghe nguồn gốc của mình nhảy vào, xoay quanh đa âm, âu yếm, đà, hóa, ether.
My response is to sing to the ineviktable terror, shake the terrible, terrific air, harness the ineluctable.
Phản ứng của tôi là hát, cho đến nỗi kinh hoàng không thể tránh khỏi. Rung chuyển sự khủng khiếp tuyệt vời, không khí, khai thác sự, không tránh khỏi.
I fill the rift with river, I feel the rift with river.
Tôi đắp rạn nứt với con sông, tôi cảm giác rạn nứt của con sông với con sông.
We breathe, and breathing is an asynchronous music, yet everybody needs the air.
Mình thở và sự thở là một đồng nhạc, tuy nhiên ai cũng cần không khí.
Yet the air needs a music breathing, and we synchronous breathe, and everybody is.
Tuy nhiên không khí cần một nhạc thở và mình đồng thở, một mỗi người lạ.
Is every music a body breathing needs?
Là mỗi nhạc một, thân hình sự thở cần.
Is everybody asynchronous, and yet we?
Và mỗi người một đồng bộ, và tuy nhiên mình.
Every air we music needs a synchronous breathing body.
Mỗi không khí mình nhạc cần là một đồng cơ thể thở.
We, the air, music, body.
Mình, không khí, nhạc, cơ thể.
Needs, breathe, breathing is.
Cần thở, sự thở là.
Yet, the, and.
Tuy nhiên, một các và.
The air yet is every body, a breathing music, and we breathe and synchronous.
Không khí tuy nhiên là mỗi người một nhạc thở và mình thở một đồng bộ.
Every music needs a body synchronous.
Một nhạc cần một cơ thể đồng bộ.
Every air needs a breathing music.
Mỗi không khí cần một nhạc thở.
We, the air, music, body.
Mình, không khí, nhạc, cơ thể.
needs, breathe, breathing is.
Cần thở, sự thở là.
Yet, the, and.
Tuy nhiên, một các, và.
Breathing is, breathing is, breathing is, and.
Sự thở là sự thở là sự thở là và.
Breathing is, breathing is, breathing is, and. Breathing is, breathing is, breathing is, and.
Sự thở là sự thở là sự thở là, và sự thở là sự thở là sự thở là và.
And. My response is to sing.
Và. Phản ứng của tôi là hát.
Thank you, Vi.
Thank you, Dao.
Hello. Thank you so much for this wonderful reading. I came in, I was a little stressed out. Now I'm very calm in my body, thanks to your word and your sound and images. When to breathe. Well, I was just listening to your voice and reflecting of your work and reflecting about how we started this program with Audre Lorde. I remember, because I'm also part of the collective She Has No Masters that both of you are part of. And I remember when we started to think of a name to call ourselves, we thought of She Has No Masters. And, some of us thought, oh, this is, from something in the 60s, is no longer concern us. And some of us thought, no, it still concerns us very much, very, very much so. And after discussions, we agreed with some compromise to keep that name, She Who Has No Masters, to speak under this umbrella, to come together and collaborate and give each other the courage to speak our truth. So I would like maybe to start from this, why this title still maybe resonates with you, and what does that mean to have no masters, and maybe what you think of it might be a little bit different today than Audre Lorde. So I want to address this maybe.
Yeah, I guess to give a little bit of context, this came about initially, Isabelle and I were in conversation, sort of, these ideals of doing, collaborating or doing something together. And we made a short film with another person in our collective, Julie T. Underhill. And it was a triptych of 3 short films. Basically, we put together 3 short films that we had each made, and they had these sort of self-reflective, autobiographical, ruminative qualities to them. And that's sort of the first time that name was used. The film as a triptych is called She Who Has No Master. And it was in reference to the Audre Lorde. Sort of one of my takeaways from that essay, because it's the essay about the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. And I guess I think about, patriarchy, and then, Vietnamese is also, there's also a strong vein of patriarchal culture in Vietnamese culture. And I was, as a Vietnamese woman writer, just, there were these stories of just that I wanted to, I just felt like there's a certain special current to, what Vietnamese women are doing just in spirit, and then also in art. And that was sort of what we were thinking about when we came together. And I hadn't met other women writers, even though I knew them. So it was really like our first genesis was, let's get together. And and, you know, talk about things or share our work. And there's something also about the bringing the multiplicity of voices into a space, and what the strength in that is. And I guess I'll also just say about the idea of the whole master's tools and having no master. I feel like this attempt that we're doing in creating a collective is not to duplicate or reverse or assume power in like the paradigms that exist. It's to find our own context and to find our own tools, or to make them, or to construct this space that uses that maybe moves us in the direction of a different paradigm for what, you know, how we define what power is, how we define what structure is. So those are some of the thoughts that I had behind that term.
Yeah, it seems like with your work really, you know, try to break boundaries, right? Not only through contents, but with form and the choice of words and cadence and silence and images and sound. V, you wanted to add something about, you know, who's the masters you want to?
Well, when I first heard of See Who Has No Masters, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I actually thought it was like a song title, you know, like it was like or like a billboard, you know, that you see on when you cross certain highways, you know, like it reminds me of like when my sister and I went to Canada. We drove across Canadian borders, and it says like, don't tailgate. Was it? I can't think of the animal. Like I want to say, not kangaroos. It wasn't kangaroos. I can't remember what the Canadians were, but it just reminded me of seeing that sign flashing ahead. But outside of the context of patriarchy and power dynamics, and I always view it as how to not be a slave of our past in general, you know, how to, I always feel like the diasporic experience, particularly from my family, where my parents were, a lot of their business were confiscated for, you know, just having, just wanting livelihood, and where my parents were in prison for their work, for just living, for existing. And so I think a lot about that in context to making art, you know, and I don't want to have a certain type of police patrolling the content of my soul. And I feel that a title like a group or a membership or a mantra, See Who Has No Master, reasserts that I'm not ready or will ever be ready to be patrolled by by any masters. And the word no master also bringing into context the concept of rotating masters, you know? So if there is masters within the no masters, which I believe can coexist in context with each other, that if you do have a rotating masters, where leaders take turns rotating each other and presenting their own leadership across time, then in some way there is no masters. the concept of like having a uniform, a diverse leadership that constantly advocate for different voices in the Vietnamese community and context, I think alleviate some of the monopoly that you often experience with dysfunctional patriarchy, and to release of that dysfunctionality, to lighten the load in general of having someone, a woman or even a man, to shape the narrative of any experience is to have all experiences being represented and to advocate for them across the board. And so so when our voices come together, which a lot of our women voices in the collective have merged, we create work that moves like the oceans, right? It has all of these waves and different wavelengths, different depth of passion, different depth of experiences. And so basically, when I think of no master, I think the ocean has no master unless you consider moon as her master. Then, I mean, who wouldn't want the moon to to patrol your soul, huh? I mean, my menstrual period, my menstrual cycle get patrolled by the moon each month, so might as well, you know. I do think that it's bringing us together, this collective, and I'm glad that it has that echo of Lordy work, you know. Now I'm just rambling.
Well, I think that that's like you hit on, you know, it's a sort of important point, and it's something that as a collective we've dealt with too. Like Isabelle calls me the leader of the collective. I've actually really resisted the idea of leadership and of being the leader or of this collective. It's a collective, so like the sort of goal of it was to have a space where these multiple voices exist, where we can kind of have a collective voice, but also honor sort of the individualities within that multiplicity, which is something I think DVAN at large, you know, is trying to do, or just diaspora at large is like, you know, that's something worth recognizing. And also the idea of a non-hierarchical structure of making something. So I guess when I think about like what, you know, how do we define power, or what you know, what is our portrait or our idea of what power is, and you know, within this space, it would be nice to sort of be able to reimagine what that is, like reimagine what strength is, and like, you know, maybe authority is not like a single voice shaping a whole project or shaping a whole, you know, narrative. So we're playing with a lot of these dynamics, and it is an experimental space where we're trying to keep open the just that structure is elastic and it's evolving, and then the shape of the work that we're doing together is sort of trying to follow its own current rather than other structures that might already be apparent.
Yeah. Yes, this is something we grappled with. I mean, when we came up with this title, I mean, it was also a gesture, you know, to say, you know, in solidarity to other women of colors, with also the acknowledgement and understanding that there is also a hierarchy, you know, like the racism within sometimes the community toward African Americans, and we wanted to address that, but also the issue of, you know, I mean, there's been overall, I mean, I don't want to essentialize, but, you know, there's a lot of pressure on the woman, Vietnamese American woman, not to tell certain stories, or to remain silent, not rock the boat, you know, just be a certain space. And also, as you said, you know, the belief that instead of, because in this country too, right, is understanding that only one can exist, you know, the practice of tokenism, you know, which is one person, only one Vietnamese woman can be, right? Or one Vietnamese man can speak Vietnamese Americans. So wanted to break that and say, you know, we have to show what better way to show diversity and complexity to work together and try to break those, you know, beyond those boundaries, and to give us the courage to speak. Speaking of that, you know, one things we thought about as we were thinking of coming together today is, you know, what is unique or overlooked about, you know, Vietnamese American women writers and poets in the diaspora. I mean, that's one thing, you know, a lot of my students are here listening today, and we say, you know, teaching Vietnamese American literature, in order to have this, we have to make an argument that something specific about Vietnamese American literature to rationalize that space. So maybe the same question can go about for women, because often that category is subsumed under the category of Vietnamese American or Southeast Asian or Asian Americans. So do you have any thought about that, about the importance, about, you know, what's come up when women have that space to speak freely without fear of any kind of master or worry or concern?
I think that there are a lot of, obviously there's a lot of stereotypes that we're, you know, sort of pushing against in the first place. Like that's sort of the first layer of, there are these expectations as a woman, one, and then as like a woman of color, and then there are a lot of stereotypes about being, you know, an Asian woman, that you're submissive or that you're quiet or that you're docile, or and then within Vietnamese culture too, there's sort of this, you know, there's a lot of self-sacrifice, and there's a lot of, you know, there's a culture of the tireless, you know, we revere the mother, but there's also like a certain, I guess, pressure of virtue that I feel like is placed on women, to be tireless and to be selfless. And so those are things, you know, on one level, I think to push against, as in like, you can be all those things and by choice, but you can also be a lot of other things, and you can be complicated and thorny and ambitious, and also fail at some of the virtues. And there's a lot in that too. I feel like that's one layer. And then there's just, like for myself personally, I also think that there's a lot happening within sort of the experimental voice and the experimental work that women have been doing as artists, that is its own kind of politics, because it's creating structures, and it's creating like ways of reading or ways of thinking and visualizing that are really important. And it's more subtle layer of like, you know, like activism or political work. Like it's like, I feel like those are really critical things, and that's where experimental work feels important to me, where, you know, it helps us to perceive the world differently, and maybe to respond differently, and to connect things differently. So those are some initial thoughts that I have. Maybe V wants to add on.
I do wish that more Vietnamese American women are given opportunities to take the national stage in very, very big ways. I feel the current narrative that we're experiencing are lopsided, where the voices being heard tend to be celebrated by specific male voices. Some of them are sexist voices, and retaining that level of sexism and advocating for them in a national arena, I think leads to future dysfunctional relationships between Vietnamese American writing on the national stage. And I think patriarchy and sexism are the primary proponents of such arena. And I don't know how did you change a system where you're not part of the system, where you're excluded from the system? How can you have a voice when that voice has been spoken for you and is spoken loudest, and say, well, you can still speak, but you will need to speak at a low volume, because if your volume is too loud, we will find a way to erase you. And I don't mean erase as in, like one can speak, but if one only has 2 other people to listen to, is that really a voice? Is that really vocality? Is that true representation of the Vietnamese American experiences for both binary and non-binary folks? I think if we were given the proper national stage, the narrative won't be so perverted. And I don't know how to change that. I've been trying by producing as many work as possible, but it's not helping, or it's not shifting, it's not transforming the narrative. So what else did I need to do? Like, I don't want to be one of those self-sacrificing Vietnamese women that break her back in order to get something accomplished. Can I stand tall, have my shoulders square? Can I sit and still have a voice without having to break my back and everyone's back while trying to have my voice heard? These are the things that I just feel like there are gatekeepers, and these gatekeepers have a dangerously loud patriarchal narrative. And the worst part about is that because these males take the national stage, I feel that all Vietnamese are being represented. All Vietnamese, especially Vietnamese writers in general, are being heard. And so all the resources that could be given to women writers and other non-binary Vietnamese writers, they are taken away quietly, indirectly. I feel that. And I feel it on a very intuitive level. And I don't know how to change it. I try everything. I mean, I'm not one to be shy about trying something. I'm an experimental writer, so I'm willing to experiment with so many different avenues of existence to elevate the Vietnamese voices up, and especially Vietnamese woman American.
I think I would say, like, I think it's a matter of gatekeeping. And I feel a lot of the same things of you, and I think we've talked about this. and you know, there's a certain invisibility that is felt as a woman of color. And I think also as a writing about Vietnam from a certain like angle, a certain experimental, or if you want to call it feminine. And I know that you know, that's a hard, it's like there's a lot associated with that word. It's not perfect. But I feel like there are resistances. Like what I see from one end is just, you know, if we're talking about like readership in America, but this isn't only like white readers. I also feel like there's the Vietnamese American or the diasporic narrative is sort of legible on certain terms. And it's legible in the terms of like writers who are still referencing war, trauma, refugee trauma, which, you know, is still an American narrative of like resettling and dealing with. So we're still in this like bind of the story is still American, and it still sort of centers, even when you're talking about, you know, even when you're critiquing empire, you're critiquing, you know, the military industrial complex, it's still being filtered through this narrative that centers sort of like the devastation that America has done, or the trauma and the victimization that you know happens to marginalized people. And I think that it would be good if readers and publishers, like readers also, and you know, and the gatekeepers are interested in the stories that operate on another level, that aren't referencing sort of the legible markers of ethnicity, of race, of diaspora, and then also just addressing the sort of more interior, subtle currents of being a diasporic person. And those are some of the frustrations that I feel as like a writer operating in this society. And I also sort of attend to that within myself, as in like, you know, it's hard to read, to come at like a Vietnamese American narrative and feel like you want to have that context, like you want to have that, you know, to understand like the group, because like you understand the war, or you understand like the refugee experience. And I think that that's an easy thing to fall back on. And I would love for art to challenge us in other ways where it doesn't, you know, necessarily like, you know, gravitate to those same markers. And then, yeah, I mean, the question of like, what do you think needs to be done? What do you think needs to be done, Isabelle? I mean, I think DVAN has tried to create a space. We publish our own work, or we do, you know, like in my own experience, I you know, I wouldn't have been able to create hybrid work if I didn't take a lot of things into my own hands. And it's sort of that, you know, you become your own production line, which is not fun all the time, and it's a lot of work, and it's scary. But I guess to not rely on the sort of larger, you know, waiting around for a publisher to say, okay, like a lot of these things I did like learn how to do and figured out a way to do in my own small way, but it is still a very small arena. I don't know, Isabelle, do you want to add?
Yes, because I think some of our audience members want to ask questions, but I think you both bring up very important points, and I really don't have the answer to that questions, what to do beside what we're doing now. And then what resonates also for me, what you were saying is, how to break this master's house, or at least put a foot there, so we can be heard without breaking our back. And because the resources are not distributed evenly. So when you try to bring together people to be heard, then it's a lot of labor as well. And sometimes we don't have the resources. So but I just want to give some space for our audience here. So again, please don't put the questions in your chat room. Please have your question in Q&A. So we have a question for Kilan Pham. She says she would love to hear more about this poem so far and what inspired it. And what was the process of writing it like, V?
I'm trying to remember. I wrote it during COVID. That I will remember. I was writing a poem a day, and this was born from writing a poem a day, or three. Maybe it was 3 poems a day. I couldn't remember. I was trying to. I was very sad. I think I got really ill for a month, and then I came out of that illness, and it was early January, and then it led to February, and I sat down and I just wrote it in Las Vegas. And I was just thinking how Vietnamese just in general love eating pho. Most of us, not all of us, but a lot of us eating pho. And I was thinking about how queer I am. And if I'm queer and I love eating pho, what are the 2 words that will fit that depiction? And pho fits the best. So, and then I thought, there should be a lesbian restaurant, called Sappha. I mean, non-lesbian people can eat there too, but it would be like the Vietnamese version of having like an Isles of Lesbos, I guess, but instead of like near water and in Greece, it would be like somewhere in the middle of like Las Vegas or something. So I was just thinking like tourists should come and dine it. And then I thought maybe it's a good place to eat pho and write poetry. I don't know. Those 2 combinations seems really sexy to me. Like having a mic, people eating pho and people reading poetry while like sipping broth, and then hearing the poem Sappha. I hope that answered your question. I mean, I don't know where I'm going with that direction.
Yes.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yes.
I hope I'm not like misquoting myself or remembering wrongly. And so I want to have T-shirts that says Sappha, and coffee mugs that says Sappha. I just think.
Let's do it. Yeah. That's, like both of you, you get in some way, you really search for freedom and true expression of your true inner self. And it seems like, but when I close my eyes and I listen to your words and music, right? Or I open my eyes and I see your image of you come together, it's a melancholic, is I don't want to say sad, but it's in, the desert image is isolate, and both of your bodies there, and then far away, it seems like it's lonesome and melancholic. So the search for freedom and freedom expression is not seem to be a given and an easy path. But so we have 2 more questions here. Titi said, I'm not a writer, so please forgive me, but with YouTube, everyone has a voice, a loud voice, no? Thank you. Yes, so something about YouTube is easier for, for people on the margin to have a voice, but I'm not sure how will you respond to this, because it's still the gatekeeper of the industry. Yes. What's your relationship with YouTube?
Well, I don't know if YouTube is the form that I automatically think of for writing or publishing books. I also like the idea that I'm not a naturally loud person, so I don't really want to have to be loud to be heard
Mm-hmm.
in the world. And I think that that's another thing that's, for me, relates to, you know, feminist work, or being a woman, or being an experimental, you know, artist, is I would like the tone, or sort of, you know, the sort of subtleties or gentleness or whatever, to be enough, to be okay, as a means of expression. I think America is a very loud culture, and people tend to respond to spectacle and the obvious and boldness and lack of nuance. I think that we have a, you know, there's an inability to really discern nuance, and that leads to a lot of divisions and aggressions and misunderstandings that are obvious in this culture. But I guess that, you know, so for the work that I'm doing, and that I hope this collective can do, it's like I would like to make a space that we can speak in the way that we naturally would, the type of art that we want to make, which is another thing of like not wanting to conform to the forms or the formats or the tropes that exist, and for that to be enough, I guess maybe it requires, like, you know, people learning how to read it too, or just a sensitivity to be able to, you know, be open to maybe these stories and these ways of expression that are less familiar and less loud. I don't know. That's sort of what I respond to when I think about, you know, loud voices, or the ability to have a voice.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then also it's just as you say, and also what we said earlier, maybe, you know, sometimes a lot of onus on us to explain and what we do and how we do things, but maybe it's not our responsibility also to educate others, or, you know, like we also talk about, you know, somebody need to make space for us. It's not only we have to fight for that space. You know, why do we have to fight for that space, right? I mean, we Americans, right? And you know what you're saying, you know, just echo that. We have one more questions here. Please, we having people talking in the chat, and also
There's a question about
questions. But Louis, you say, do you think writers have a responsibility to address the social complication of their time?
a responsibility.
Yeah.
I think it's always a choice, but I am open to hearing. I don't want to take up all the space. Like, I feel like I can only answer for myself on that. And then again, like, if I say what I think other writers or artists should do, that again is just my opinion. I think that we're in this moment of, what I think is dangerous is expecting or putting the onus on the writer to be a moral guide. I feel like that is happening a little bit with, you know, with writers of color, where, and Isabelle just said something about that, where it's sort of this burden of educating the right way to think about race, or the right way to be, becomes, you know, an expectation. And I think that that's great if the writer wants to occupy that role, and that's wonderful if that is what a writer wants to do. But I think that art also has the ability to allow us to experience ambiguity and nuance, and maybe also sort of those those failures of moral. Like, there's a lot of complexity involved. There's like shame. There's like self-loathing. There's internalized racism. There's like all these levels of experience, and I think it can be, like, again, it comes back to, you know, being able to read. Like, if we expect art and literature to give us moral guidance, maybe it sort of dampens our ability to read more finely. And I think that that can affect the way that we also read each other in life, in the world. So they're just some thoughts, and I don't have any clear answers for it. I am concerned with the political and with the historical in my work, but I'm also concerned with, you know, interiority, with just, you know, the apolitical, with escapism, with just a lot of things, desire, and, you know, so different levels. What about you, V? Do you feel a responsibility to address social complications?
I mean, it's the same questions that, you know, like, should writers, Vietnamese writers, male writers particularly, who have achieved enormous success in the literary industry, should they now be mentoring young young folks, Vietnamese American, and should they take the burden? And I remember talking to Katrina Dotson, actually, and she said, you know, they are not obligated to, you know, and I see her point, you know. I see that, you know, like if you have taken so much work and time to climb a mountain, and you are sitting up at the peak and you're admiring the landscape and the clouds and you're inhaling its beauty, and you see one person young struggling down below, trying to climb a mountain of razor blades, and it's struggling and they're bleeding, do you look down, you like, do you enjoy the scene, or do you turn a blind eye and just say, well, I went through that, good luck? I mean, I worry that the Vietnamese womanness in us that want to sacrifice, want to do that same thing that we fight not to do. So in many ways, I'm like, I understand where Katrina is coming from, but I also think that if you enter a church and there is a basket of money and no one is looking, and you can walk away with that basket of money and you steal it from the church and no one sees it, should you do it anyway? You know? Anyway, I'll stop there.
Yes, it's interesting you brought that up. I mean, I didn't mention his name because I was trying to not mention his name because this was for women only, you know, centering the women's. But one thing that I guess people know is that the DVAN co-director is Vietnamese, and then he's using some of his fame now to raise money for DVAN to do this kind of work. And actually, I just got an email from him a few days ago talking about how we should build a workshop for young Vietnamese, you know, students or artists here at the university, maybe the whole summer workshops, and then find and support different groups, or maybe like we're talking with Shiva Snow Master to also have some workshop for emerging writers and find, you know, help us get the funding for that. Another things we're trying to do, we just received funding actually from the DVAN at SFSU for scholarship for young people in the community who want to do write and be a writer or an artist, or want to support the community, and to send a message that the art is also valuable and enrich us. But it's a lot of us doing our part, you know, the way we can, but you know, but not everyone can stay on the ground or is willing to stay on the ground to support everybody. I don't know if we're fully successful in it, but this is really the intent with this collective and with DVAN. but I'm getting a message that we are done with our program today. So I want to thank very much both of you for speaking so much of your truth here, right? This Zoom, I think, is really allowing a type of intimacy and really deep reflections that I did not expect. And I thank the Poetry Center for hosting us and collaborating and supporting DVAN at SFSU, and Steve Dickerson with his team. Thank you.
Thank you.